The bruise on my rib cage ached with every shallow breath I took, a persistent, ugly reminder hidden beneath layers of wool and linen. It was a souvenir from yesterday, when my stepmother, Isolde, decided my posture wasn't sufficiently deferential during Lord Bourne's visit. The visit where my father, with a smile that didn't touch his eyes, practically gift-wrapped my future. 3 weeks, just 3 weeks until my 18th birthday. The date circled in my mind like a vulture. The law would no longer consider me a child under my father's protection. It would consider me his property to be legally transferred. The contract with Lord Boren was already drawn up. I'd overheard the lawyers whispering. It included clauses about my obedience and his discretion. The word made my skin crawl. Lord Boren was older than my father, with a laugh that sounded like gravel and hands that were always damp and possessive. I stood at my bedroom window, the one with the warped pane that made the world outside look like it was weeping. The rain streaked down, each drop tracing a path I couldn't follow. Down in the courtyard, Isolde's voice pierced the downpour, a scalpel of sound flaying some poor scullery maid for a chipped plate. My father's study door at the end of the hall remained a bastion of silent complicity. It hadn't opened for me since my mother's funeral, since he traded his grief for Isolde's capital and my future for the settlement of his debts. A soft, frantic knock shattered the heavy silence. I flinched, the movement pulling at the bruise. "Come in," I said, forcing my voice into a flat calm I didn't feel. The door cracked open, revealing a girl younger than me, her face pale as milk, eyes wide with a fear I knew intimately. A new maid, then, another rabbit in the snare. "Miss Leora?" she whispered, as if the walls themselves might report her. There's there's a man at the servants' entrance. He's asking for you. He won't give his name." My heart gave a hard, painful thud against my sore ribs. "My stepmother." "He's been waiting in the rain for an hour, miss. He says it's urgent, life or death." Her voice dropped even lower. He's not like the others." Something in her tone, a thread of desperate hope woven through the fear, caught me. It was the same thread that had kept me searching law books, that had me smuggling my mother's jewels to a clerk for information. It was the thread of a way out, however thin, however dangerous. "Tell him 5 minutes," I said, the decision settling in my stomach like a stone. The servant's entrance was a forgotten throat of the manor, smelling of damp stone, old potatoes, and wet dog. The man waiting there seemed carved from the gloom itself. He stood perfectly, unnaturally still, water streaming from dark hair that fell to his shoulders, soaking into the simple, travel-worn clothes of a laborer or a merchant's guard. But his stillness was all wrong. It wasn't the weary slump of a drenched commoner. It was the absolute poised control of a predator or a statue. Then he turned, and his eyes found mine. The air left my lungs in a rush. His face was beautiful, not in the soft, painted way of the courtiers I'd seen. This was a harsh, elegant beauty, all sharp angles and planes, like a cliff face sculpted by a relentless sea. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. They were the color of a winter twilight, gray and silver and impossibly deep. Ancient eyes, eyes that had seen centuries pass. "Leora," he said. His voice was low, a vibration in the stone corridor rather than a sound. It wasn't a question. "Who are you?" I managed, my own voice a frail thing. "My name is Kalen, and I am here to offer you a choice where you have none." He took a silent step forward. I realized I hadn't heard his boots on the wet flagstones, not a single splash. "Your father will sign the contract with Boren in 3 days. The announcement will be public. After that, any escape becomes a crime. You become a fugitive." The cold fact of it, stated so bluntly by this strange, quiet man, made me sway. "I'm aware of my cage, sir. I don't need its dimensions described." A ghost of something, not a smile but an acknowledgement, touched his lips. "You've been searching for its key. Law books, marriage age precedents. You sold your mother's amethyst pendant to a clerk named Harris for information." My blood ran cold. How could he know that? "You are looking for a legal exit. I am holding one." From inside his worn coat, he drew not a weapon, but a single piece of parchment folded neatly. He held it out. "Marry me." A laugh brittle and sharp escaped me. "You're mad. Or cruel. Which is it? I don't know you. You could be a murderer, a slaver. You could be worse than Boren." "I could be," he agreed, his tone utterly reasonable. "But I am not. Boren's first wife died falling down stairs that were never slippery. Her second vanished on a hunting trip. Her horse returned alone. You would be the third. A tragic statistic." His winter eyes held mine, allowing the horror of it to sink in. The rumors I dismissed as gossip curdled into probable truth in my gut. "And you?" I challenged, trembling. "What happens to wife number one with you?" "You become free, legally, irrevocably free of your father's authority. You will have safety, a home, and my protection. Nothing more is required unless you choose to give it." He extended the parchment again. "This is a marriage contract, witnessed and ready. It voids any prior familial contract upon signing. It is your legal shield." The word home echoed in the hollow space he'd carved inside me. Safety, protection, concepts as foreign to me as this man's silent stepfoots. It was a trap. It had to be. No one offered salvation without a price. "Why?" The question was a plea. "Why would you do this? What do you want from me?" For the first time, his perfect composure wavered. The ancient winter eyes showed a flicker of something raw and weary. "Let us say I understand what it is to be trapped by a duty you did not choose, and I need a partner, not a pawn. You have fought for your autonomy with the tools you had. That is a quality I require." It was the worst possible reason. It was honest, and it resonated with the desperate fighting core of me that hadn't been completely smothered. The maid's frightened, hopeful face flashed in my mind, the rain on the window, the ache in my ribs, the looming shadow of Lord Boren's damp hands. It was insanity. It was the only sanity left. My hand, cold and shaking, reached out. I didn't take the paper. I looked straight into those twilight eyes. "If this is a trick, I will find a way to make you regret it." Something like respect glinted in his gaze. I do not doubt it. I took the contract. My fingers brushed his. His skin was cool, like marble in a shaded grove. "When?" "Tonight. Everything is prepared. By dawn, you will be beyond their reach." Tonight. The finality of it was terrifying. Isolde's shrieks, my father's cold disappointment, the scandal, it would all be a storm I left behind. I would be in the eye of it, and then gone. I looked down at the contract, the words blurred. My name weighted on a blank line. My signature would seal my fate. Escape or entrapment, freedom or a deeper dungeon. I took a breath that hurt my bruised side. I found the strength in the hurt. "Where do I sign?" The ceremony was a ghost of a wedding, a tiny, forgotten chapel on the edge of the town, smelling of mildew and old incense. The priest was bleary-eyed, his questions fading into silence when Kalen placed a small, heavy bag of coins into his hand. The witnesses were two hooded figures who appeared from the shadows, signed with elegant, unfamiliar script, and melted back into the night. I wore my plainest day dress. No flowers, no family, no blessings. Just me, a stranger, and a man with ancient eyes. Kalen spoke his vows in that same low, resonant voice. They were the traditional words, but he infused them with a solemn gravity that made them sound like a sacred oath. He placed a ring on my finger. It was silver, set with a single dark gray stone that seemed to hold a tiny, swirling nebula within it. It was cold and heavier than it looked, as if it held the weight of years. When it was my turn, my voice was a whisper, almost lost in the drafty chapel. "I do." The priest pronounced us married. Kalen didn't kiss me. He simply took my hand, his cool fingers closing around mine with careful precision, and led me back out into the rain-swept night. A plain black carriage waited, devoid of crests or markings. No driver was visible on the bench. "Where is your home?" I asked as he helped me inside. The interior was dark, smelling of leather and something faintly herbal. "Far from here," he said, his form blocking the doorway for a moment before he followed me in. The door shut with a soft, final click. Rest, Leora. The journey is long. The carriage began to move with a lurch, then settled into a smooth, rapid pace that felt unnatural on the rough road. I watched through the window as the familiar, hateful lanterns of my town vanished behind a curtain of rain and darkness. Then there were only trees, a rushing black wall on either side. The forest deepened, the road began to climb, the air grew colder. Exhaustion, a heavier cloak than my wool dress, settled over me. The adrenaline of the escape seeped away, leaving me hollow and shivering. My eyes grew leaden. The last thing I remembered was the rhythmic sound of the rain, the rocking of the carriage, and Kalen's quiet, unwavering presence in the darkness opposite me. I didn't dream. I fell into a void of utter stillness. I woke to sunlight. The world outside my window wasn't just a view. It was a statement, a declaration of power so absolute it made my old life seem like a sad little play performed in a closet. Mistress Valora returned later, her arms filled with fabrics in colors like twilight and deep forest green. "For you, my lady," she said, laying them on the enormous bed. "The Lord Guardian thought you might appreciate a change from your travel clothes." The kindness in her voice was genuine, but my guard was up. Kindness had always been a currency spent for something in return. "Thank you," I said, my tone carefully neutral. I touched the soft wool of a dove gray dress. It was finer than anything Isolde had ever owned. "Would you like me to help you dress, or would you prefer to explore first?" Explore. The word was a key. "I'd like to see the library," I said, remembering Callan's promise of archives. Knowledge was my only weapon here. Mistress Valora's smile held a new warmth. "A fine choice. I'll have someone show you the way. But first, perhaps some breakfast. You didn't touch the tea." The food was exquisite, flaky pastries that dissolved on the tongue, fruit I couldn't name with a taste like sunshine and honey. I ate because my body demanded it, but every bite felt like a surrender to this new, bewildering reality. The servant who arrived to guide me was a young man, human, with bright eyes and an easy grin. "Name's Corin, my lady. I work in the stables, but I know every cranny of this place. The library's a bit of a maze. They say folks get lost in there for days." He led me through corridors that seemed to shift and change, passing courtyards open to the sky and galleries lined with statues that watched with stone eyes. We passed other people, more of the graceful, pale beings I now understood were vampires, and many humans like Corin and myself. They all paused, offering bows or curtsies, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. "The Lord Guardian doesn't stand much on ceremony inside the citadel," Corin chattered, "but everyone knows who you are. News travels fast on the mountain wind." "Are there many humans here?" I asked. "More than in most vampire holds," Corin said with pride. "Lord Callan's fair. The Citadel's protection extends to all who swear allegiance. Humans run the greenhouses, the forges, the stables. We've got our own quarter in the lower valley, too. It's a good life." He glanced at me. "You'll see." The library doors were massive, carved from a single dark wood, inlaid with silver constellations. Corin pushed one open with a grunt. "Here you are, my lady. If you need anything, just ask for Corin at the stables. I know all the best hiding spots, too, if you need to escape your tutors." He winked and was gone. I stepped inside and my breath caught. It wasn't a room, it was a canyon of knowledge. 3 soaring floors of shelves stretched into shadowy distances, connected by delicate wrought iron staircases that spiraled up like wisps of smoke. Light fell in great golden shafts from high, arched windows, illuminating swirling motes of dust. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and that strange, clean energy that hummed through the entire citadel. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I wandered, my fingers trailing over spines of books in languages I couldn't read. I found sections on astronomy, with charts of unfamiliar stars, on botany with drawings of glowing plants, on histories with dates that spanned millennia. In a quiet corner on the second floor, I found a reading nook nestled in a window embrasure, a cushioned seat, a small table, and a stack of books someone had left behind. One was open. I glanced at the page. The script was flowing, elegant, and utterly alien. Yet, as I stared, the curves and dots began to shift, to make sense. It was like listening to a song in a foreign tongue and suddenly understanding the story it told. The words clarified in my mind. And so the first ward was laid, not in stone, but in starlight and sacrifice, a weave to bind the heart of darkness. I stumbled back from the book as if burned, my heart hammered. This was the old script Callan had mentioned, and I could read it. The realization was a cold wave. This wasn't a coincidence. This was part of the qualities he said this place needed. Fascinating, isn't it? The old tongue. The voice came from behind me, soft and cultured. I turned to see an elderly vampire man, his hair white as snow, his eyes a gentle amber. He wore simple robes and carried a stack of scrolls. "I am Professor Alistair," he said, offering a slight bow, "keeper of the archives, and you must be Lady Leora. Lord Callan said you might have an affinity for our older texts." "You knew?" I whispered. He suspected. The bloodline of the Starlight heroes often carry the gift. It has been many years since we had a translator of your potential. His gaze was assessing, but not unkind. "This," he gestured to the open book, "is the Canticle of the First Ward, foundational myth, or so most believe. Your ability to read it suggests the foundations might be more than myth." Starlight heroes, the term echoed in the silent library. What does that mean? My family were farmers, traders, nothing more. Families forget, lines fade, magic sleeps. He set his scrolls down. "Lord Callan has asked me to be one of your tutors. Would you like to begin now? There is much to discuss about the history you have apparently inherited." For the next few hours, Professor Alistair spoke of the ancient past, of a time when great beings of shadow and hunger, called the Devourers, threatened all realms. An alliance between the first vampire lords and an order of human mages who could channel celestial energy, the Starlight heroes. Together, they built great wards, magical prisons, to bind the most terrible of these devourers. The last and strongest of these wards was here, beneath the Sky-Reach Citadel. "The Guardian's duty is not just to rule," Alistair said, his voice low and solemn. "It is to maintain the ward, to ensure the seals hold. The magic is old, Leora. It weakens with time. It requires reinforcement." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "And how is it reinforced?" The professor's amber eyes held mine. "With bloodlines tied to its creation, with will, with sacrifice." He looked away. "The old texts speak in riddles." Callan's words came back to me. "I need a partner, not a pawn." Was this the partnership? My bloodline, my gift, used to shore up some ancient magic? Was that why he truly brought me here? The afternoon sun was slanting low through the windows when a different voice interrupted us. "Professor, my lady." A woman stood at the entrance to the nook. She was vampire, stunningly beautiful, with hair the color of dark wine and eyes of cool green. She wore a gown of emerald silk that must have cost a fortune. Her smile was perfect and utterly empty. "Forgive the intrusion. I am Lady Seraphina of House Valerius. My father sits on the Guardian's Council. We heard of your arrival and wished to extend a welcome." She glanced at my simple, borrowed dress. "I see you are settling in." Her tone was pleasant. Every word was a needle. "Thank you," I said, forcing a politeness I'd learned from Isolde's best performances. "Lord Callan has always had unique tastes," Seraphina continued, gliding closer. She examined the open book on the table. "The old tongue, how quaint! A dusty skill for a dusty past. The present requires different talents, of course. Political acumen, social grace, an understanding of power." She looked at me. "But I'm sure you will learn in time. We must all have patience." Professor Alistair cleared his throat. Lady Leora's understanding is already profound, Lady Seraphina. The old tongue is the key to our most vital histories. Is it? Seraphina's smile didn't reach her eyes. History is a lesson, not a leash. We must look to the future, don't you agree, my lady? A future where strength, true strength, decides our fate. She inclined her head. I look forward to seeing you at the council gathering tomorrow. It will be enlightening. She left, her perfume lingering, a scent of night-blooming flowers and ice. Be wary of her, Alistair murmured when she was gone. The House Valerius believes power is the only true currency. They have long desired a closer alliance with the Guardian's line. So you mean she wanted to marry Callan? He has refused her and every other candidate for 50 years. Your arrival is a significant obstacle to her ambitions. An obstacle, that's all I was to someone like her. A human obstacle with a useful trick. I left the library with my mind reeling. Starlight heroes, ancient wards, political rivals. This was the simple arrangement Callan had promised? Corin found me wandering a hallway looking lost. There you are, my lady. The Lord Guardian requests your presence in the map room. Follow me. The map room was a circular chamber in one of the Citadel's towers. The walls were covered with vast, meticulously detailed maps of the mountain ranges, valleys, and territories of the North Reach. In the center, a large table held a three-dimensional representation of the citadel itself, carved from pale stone. Callan stood by it, tracing a line with his finger. He looked up as I entered. Leora, Professor Alistair. I dreamed of my mother, not as the pale, fading woman on her deathbed, but as a young woman with laughing eyes, her hands stained with soil from her garden. She was showing me a night-blooming flower, its petals the color of my ringstone. It only opens under the true starlight, my heart, she whispered in the dream. It remembers what the sun forgets. Then the dream shifted, and she was standing at the foot of my enormous bed in the citadel, her face etched with sorrow. You found your way to the mountain, she said. Now you must learn to listen to its heart, and never, ever trust the song of the hollow wind. She faded before I could ask her what she meant. I woke with her warnings echoing in my mind, the strange whistle from the night before tangled with her words. The hollow wind. Mistress Valora brought my breakfast, and a simple, sturdy outfit of soft leather trousers, a warm tunic, and boots. For your excursion, she said. Her usual serenity was tinged with concern. The deep ways are cold, and they remember. Keep your minds clear, child. Do not let the echoes lead you astray. Echoes? Thoughts that are not your own, whispers on the edge of hearing, the thing that sleeps, dreams, and its dreams leak. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold stone floor traced my spine. Callan met me at the entrance to the lower galleries. He was dressed similarly, looking more like a scout than king. He carried no visible weapons, but the air of lethality around him was more pronounced down here, away from the sunlight and courtly manners. We go to the heart, he said, simply, and turned into a descending corridor. The citadel changed as we went down. The elegant stonework gave way to rougher, older rock, seemingly carved by giant hands rather than masons. The air grew colder, drier, and the strange hum of energy I felt everywhere else intensified, vibrating in my teeth. The light came from crystals set in the walls, glowing with a cool, blue-white luminescence. We passed vault-like doors of black iron, sealed with complex locks and etched with faded, familiar symbols, the old tongue, warding sigils. I could read some. Binding, silence, stillness. The catacombs of the builders, Callan said, his voice hushed. The first guardians and the starlight heirs who worked with them. They are buried here, close to their work. The corridor ended at a circular antechamber. In its center stood a single, massive door. It was made of a metal that seemed to drink the light, darker than midnight. In its surface, inlaid with silver and something that glittered like crushed diamond, was a vast, intricate design, a multi-pointed star intersecting with a complex geometric lattice. At its very center was a shallow, hand-shaped depression. "The last door," Kalen said, his voice hushed. "It has not been fully opened in 500 years. Only a guardian and a confirmed starlight heir, together, can breach it." "Confirmed?" He took my left hand, the one with the ring. "The marriage bond confirmed the bloodline. The ring is the key." He guided my hand toward the depression. "Place your palm here. Do not fear it." I hesitated, my mother's dream warning in my ears, but I had come this far. I pressed my hand into the cold metal. For a moment, nothing. Then a sharp, bright pain lanced from my ring finger through my entire arm. I gasped, but didn't pull away. The dark stone in my ring flared with an intense silvery light. The light traveled from the ring through the silver inlay of the door, racing along the lines of the star and the lattice until the entire design blazed. With a sound like a deep musical sigh, the door split vertically down the center of the star and swung inward, silent on unimaginable hinges. The light that spilled out was not the blue-white of the crystals. It was pure, liquid silver. Starlight. We stepped through. The ward chamber was not a chamber. It was a cavern whose ceiling was lost in a swirling, nebulous darkness that mimicked a night sky, complete with slowly moving pinpoint stars. The floor was smooth black stone, and in the very center, dominating the space, was the ward. It was a sphere of interlocking bands of light, silver, gold, and deepest blue, slowly rotating around a core of absolute blackness. The bands were etched with miles of infinitesimally small Old Tongue script, flowing and living. The sphere pulsed gently in time with that deep, rhythmic vibration I had been hearing. Thump, thump. It was beautiful, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen, because within the sphere of light, within that core of blackness, something moved. Not a shape, but a presence, a vast, slow, malevolent consciousness. I could feel it sleeping, dreaming its dark dreams, and I could see, here and there on the rotating bands, patches where the light was dull, frayed, like worn cloth, the decay Kalen had spoken of. My ring burned with a feverish heat, resonating with the great sphere. The thread I felt pulling me downward was now a cable connecting me directly to this awful, glorious creation. "This is it," Kalen whispered, his usual composure shattered by awe and dread. "The prison of Threnody, the last devourer." I could not speak. The scale of it, the responsibility crushed my lungs. "Your presence strengthens the silver bands," he said, pointing. "The celestial weave. See how they glow brighter near us? Your bloodline sings to it, but it is not enough to repair the fraying. It only slows the tearing." I found my voice, a raw scrape. "How do we repair it?" The texts speak of a rekindling, a ritual performed at the solstice when the veil between the earthly and celestial is thinnest. It requires a starlight heir, willingly channeling their essence into the ward, guided by the guardian. But the knowledge of the specific rites is fragmented, lost in the very texts we cannot fully read. He looked at me, his face etched in the silver light. "This is why your gift is everything, Leora. You must find the rekindling rite before the next winter solstice, or the fraying will become a rupture." 6 months. The deadline hung in the starlit air. As I stared, mesmerized and horrified, I saw something else. Faint, ghostly tendrils of shadow, like thin smoke, seemed to seep from the frayed sections of the ward. They drifted lazily upward toward the cavern ceiling, where they dissipated. But one tendril, thicker than the others, drifted not up, but sideways, toward a dark, natural fissure in the cavern wall. "Where does that go?" I asked, pointing. Kalen's face tightened. "The underways, a maze of old lava tubes and natural tunnels that run through the mountain. They are mostly sealed, but not all." He watched the shadow tendril with deep concern. "The dreams, the influence, it finds cracks. We must hope the seals hold." A hollow wind, my mother's words. Was this the source of the whistle? A sudden, violent tremor shook the cavern, not the deep pulse, but a sharp, jerking spasm. The great ward shuddered. The bands of light screeched, a sound of twisting metal and breaking glass that echoed in the soul. A new, jagged crack of darkness appeared on one of the golden bands. Kalen grabbed my arm. "We must go, now." He pulled me back toward the door, just as another tremor hit. From the dark fissure, the one where the shadow had drifted, a wave of palpable wrongness washed out, a feeling of icy, hungry malice that had my knees buckling. A high, chittering sound, like stone on stone, echoed from the tunnel. We stumbled through the last door, and Kalen slammed his own palm against the outside, the door sealed with a definitive boom, cutting off the starlight and the horror. We stood in the blue-lit antechamber, breathing heavily. My ring had cooled, but my hand was trembling. "What was that?" I panted. "An awakening spike," Kalen said, his voice grim. "They are becoming more frequent. And that sound from the underways?" He ran his hair through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "The influence is spreading, finding form. We have less time than I thought." We hurried back through the catacombs. The citadel, when we reached the upper levels, felt fragile, a delicate shell over a bubbling volcano. I retreated to the library, to the canticle of the first ward. I had to find answers, now. Professor Alastair found me there hours later, pale and surrounded by open scrolls. "You have seen it," he said, not a question. "I have. I need to understand the rekindling. Where do I look?" He placed a small... The gown Mistress Valora laid out for the council gathering was the color of a deep winter night, scattered with subtle silver embroidery like distant stars. It was beautiful, and it felt like armor. As she helped me dress, her fingers were deft and sure. "You have a strength in you, child," she said softly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "It is not the strength of swords or magic. It is the strength of a river stone, worn smooth by hardship, unyielding at its core. Remember that today. They will test you. They will try to make you feel small, an outsider. You are neither. You are the Lady of Skyreach. Your place was written in stars long before they drew breath." Her words were oddly comforting. "You sound like you believe in the old myths, Mistress Valora." A strange, sad smile touched her lips. "I believe in truth that wears the cloak of myth, and I have served this citadel and the line of its guardians for a very long time. I knew your mother's grandmother. She had your eyes and your gift." The revelation stole my breath. You knew my family?" "I have always watched for the heirs. It is part of my service. There, you are ready. Remember, listen, and know that you are not alone in that chamber." The council chamber took my newfound resolve and squeezed it tight. It was a semicircular room of dark, polished wood and black stone. Tall, narrow windows looked out onto terrifying drops. 12 high-backed chairs were arranged in a tiered crescent. Above them, on a dais, were 2 larger thrones. One, carved of dark ironwood, was empty. The other, slightly smaller, of pale ash, was meant for me. The room was already filling. I recognized Lord Valerius, Seraphina's father, a tall, imposing vampire with silver hair and a face like a cold, handsome cliff. Lady Seraphina stood beside him, a vision in crimson, her green eyes missing nothing. Other council members filed in, a broad-shouldered vampire with a warrior's scars. Lord Bryn of the Eastern Passes, Professor Alistair had briefed me. A pair of twin sisters with fiery red hair who spoke in low, synchronized murmurs, the ladies of the Ironwood. An elderly human man with sharp, intelligent eyes, Magistrate Alden, representing the Valley settlements. All conversation died as Kalen entered from a side door. He wore black and silver, the guardian's circlet of office, a simple band of platinum set with a single dark gem on his brow. He looked every inch the ruler, remote and powerful. His gaze found me, gave the faintest nod, and he led me to the dais. "Be seated," he said, his voice filling the room without effort. I sat in the pale ash throne, feeling its unyielding shape. It was still warm from the sun through the window, or perhaps that was my imagination. "This gathering welcomes Lady Leora Thorne, my consort. She will observe today's proceedings." Observe or participate. The consort has a voice on this council by ancient law, if the guardian permits it. Does she have the knowledge to use it? "My lady is learning our ways with commendable speed. She will speak when she has something of value to add. Shall we begin with the trade reports from the southern valleys?" The next hour was a dizzying lesson in governance. Disputes over mining rights, tariffs on goods from the lowlands, concerns about bandit activity on the western roads. Kalen listened, asked sharp questions, made decisions that seemed swift and fair. I watched the council members. Some, like Magistrate Alden, leaned forward, engaged. Others, like Lord Valerius, watched Kalen with a calculated stillness. Seraphina's eyes rarely left me. The topic shifted to the citadel itself. "The energy fluctuations from the deep levels continue, Guardian," reported a severe-looking vampire woman, master of the forges. "We request an allocation of resources to bolster the secondary stabilizers." The room grew noticeably quieter. "The deep-level fluctuations are a natural phenomenon of the mountain's geothermal heart," Kalen said, his tone dismissing. "The stabilizers are sufficient. Resources are better spent on the outer defenses and the valley granaries." "With respect," Lord Valerius cut in, "the geothermal heart seems increasingly agitated. Some on this council believe we should investigate the source more thoroughly. Perhaps the old systems require not maintenance, but invention. There is power there, going to waste, while we ration magic for lights and forges." A dangerous spark glinted in his eyes. Harness the ward's power, just as Professor Alistair had warned. "The old systems are not ours to reinvent," Kalen said, a frosty edge entering his voice. "They are ours to preserve. That is the duty of the Guardian. That is the oath. Duties change. Oaths can be reinterpreted," Seraphina said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was musical, reasonable. "What served an ancient fear may not serve a modern kingdom. Imagine, Father, if that power could be safely channeled. Our forges could create wonders. Our fields would never know frost. We could be a true power in the world, not just custodians of a dark secret." Her vision was seductive. I saw several council members nod thoughtfully. "The secret is dark for a reason, Lady Seraphina," said the elderly Magistrate Alden, his human voice firm. "My people's oldest stories speak of the time of shadow. They are not stories of power to be used, but of a terror to be kept locked away. I stand with the Guardian. Preservation, not exploration." "Stories for children," Lord Valerius scoffed. "My lady," Seraphina turned her green eyes directly at me. The room's attention followed. "You are new to us, unburdened, but—" The gown Mistress Valora laid out for the council gathering was the color of a deep winter night, scattered with subtle silver embroidery like distant stars. It was beautiful, and it felt like armor. As she helped me dress, her fingers were deft and sure. "You have a strength in you, child," she said softly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "It is not the strength of swords or magic. It is the strength of a river stone, worn smooth by hardship, unyielding at its core. Remember that today. They will test you. They will try to make you feel small and outsider. You are neither. You are the Lady of Skyreach. Your place was written in stars long before they drew breath. Her words were oddly comforting. You sound like you believe in the old myths, Mistress Valora. A strange, sad smile touched her lips. I believe in truth that wears the cloak of myth, and I have served this citadel and the line of its guardians for a very long time. I knew your mother's grandmother. She had your eyes and your gift. The revelation stole my breath. You, you knew my family? I have always watched for the heirs. It is part of my service. There, you are ready. Remember, listen, and know that you are not alone in that chamber. The council chamber took my newfound resolve and squeezed it tight. It was a semicircular room of dark polished wood and black stone. Tall, narrow windows looked out onto terrifying drops. 12 high-backed chairs were arranged in a tiered crescent. Above them, on a dais, were two larger thrones. One, carved of dark ironwood, was empty. The other, slightly smaller, of pale ash, was meant for me. The room was already filling. I recognized Lord Valerius, Seraphina's father, a tall, imposing vampire with silver hair and a face like a cold, handsome cliff. Lady Seraphina stood beside him, a vision in crimson, her green eyes missing nothing. Other council members filed in. A broad-shouldered vampire with a warrior's scars. Lord Bryn of the Eastern Passes, Professor Alistair had briefed me. A pair of twin sisters with fiery red hair who spoke in low, synchronized murmurs, the ladies of the Ironwood. An elderly human man with sharp, intelligent eyes, Magistrate Alden, representing the Valley settlements. All conversation died as Kalen entered from a side door. He wore black and silver, the guardian's circlet of office, a simple band of platinum set with a single dark gem on his brow. He looked every inch the ruler, remote and powerful. His gaze found me, gave the faintest nod, and he led me to the dais. "Be seated," he said, his voice filling the room without effort. I sat in the pale ash throne, feeling its unyielding shape. It was still warm from the sun through the window, or perhaps that was my imagination. "This gathering welcomes Lady Leora Thorne, my consort. She will observe today's proceedings." Observe or participate. The consort has a voice on this council by ancient law, if the guardian permits it. Does she have the knowledge to use it? My lady is learning our ways with commendable speed. She will speak when she has something of value to add. Shall we begin with the trade reports from the southern valleys? The next hour was a dizzying lesson in governance. Disputes over mining rights, tariffs on goods from the lowlands, concerns about bandit activity on the western roads. Kalen listened, asked sharp questions, made decisions that seemed swift and fair. I watched the council members. Some, like Magistrate Alden, leaned forward, engaged. Others, like Lord Valerius, watched Kalen with a calculated stillness. Seraphina's eyes rarely left me. The topic shifted to the citadel itself. The energy fluctuations from the deep levels The crystal tablet did not leave my side. Its words, the price they demanded, were a constant hum in my thoughts, a counterpoint to the ward's deep, troubling pulse. My days took on a new, urgent rhythm. Mornings were spent with Professor Alistair, not just on history, but on magical theory, the nature of celestial energy, the architecture of binding spells, the ways a ritual could be corrupted. Afternoons, Kalen himself trained me in what he called mental fortification. We sat in the quiet of the painting tower, surrounded by his half-finished storms and landscapes. "The Devourer's influence is not force," he explained, his winter eyes intense. "It is persuasion. It finds your fears, your desires, your hidden shames, and it whispers that it can fix them. It offers power to the powerless, freedom to the trapped, vengeance to the wronged. You must know your own heart so completely that you recognize when the voice inside is not your own." It was exhausting, painful work. to dredge up the memory of my mother's last rattling breath, of my father's cold eyes signing my life away, of Isolde's biting cruelties, to hold them in the light and examine them so no shadow could use them against me. "Why do you trust me with this?" I asked him one afternoon, after a particularly grueling session where I'd had to recount in detail the day I'd sold my mother's jewels. "You barely know me." "I know the shape of your integrity," he said, cleaning a paintbrush with careful, precise strokes. "It is in your choices, the desperate but legal escape, the demand to be useful, the way you face the council. You are a person who, when presented with the full, terrible truth, does not run from it. You square your shoulders and ask, what must be done? That is a rarer quality than any magical gift." His words warmed me, a fragile glow in the cold uncertainty. Our partnership was deepening into a genuine, wary trust. We were two people bound by a duty neither had chosen, finding an unexpected alliance in the face of annihilation. Meanwhile, the citadel buzzed with subtle tensions. Serafina and her faction grew more vocal, pushing for energy surveys of the lower depths. Kalen parried them with political skill, but the pressure was mounting. The tremor we'd felt in the ward chamber had been noticed. Whispers of mountain sickness and failing foundations began to circulate just as Lord Valerius had promised. The dripping stream had begun. I spent evenings in the library with the crystal tablet and other corroborating texts. The rekindling ritual was complex. It required specific alignments, focused will, and that free gift of my essence, my life force, my very identity, woven into the ward. The permanent bond it mentioned with Kalen was vague, but Professor Allister believed it was a soul-deep tether, a sharing of the ward's burden, and a connection to each other that would last as long as the ward stood. It was a marriage far more profound than the legal one we had. One evening, as I transcribed a particularly dense passage on essence channeling, I felt a sudden, sharp draft. The candles in my nook guttered. The mountain's deep pulse seemed to skip a beat, replaced by a moment of hollow silence. Then I heard it. A melody, faint, beautiful, and unbearably sad. It wound through the silent library, a wordless song played on some unseen flute. It spoke of loneliness, of being an outsider in a glittering court. It echoed my own hidden fears of never being enough, of being a fraud in a lady's gown. It promised understanding, a friend in the silence. The hollow song. My skin prickled. I clutched the ring, feeling its steady, reassuring warmth. Beware the hollow song that calls from the cracks. This was not my own heart's whisper. This was something other, mimicking, luring. I closed my eyes, doing as Kalen had taught me. I centered myself on the true anchors, my mother's love in her garden, my own stubborn fight for freedom, the sight of the sunward valley at peace. The song's promise of pity felt cheap, insulting compared to that hard-won strength. I opened my eyes and said clearly into the empty air, "I hear you, and I refuse you." The melody wavered. A note of discordant anger slithered into it. Then it faded, leaving behind only the rustle of pages and the distant, real sound of the citadel's night watch. But I was not alone. Serafina stood at the end of the aisle between the shelves, partially shrouded in shadow. How long had she been there? Had she heard the song, or had she been its source? "Reading late, my lady?" she asked, her voice smooth. She glided forward. "Such devotion, but one must be careful. Too much time alone with old words can unbalance the mind. We've seen it before. The mountain air, the isolation, the pressure. It makes people hear things, see things. A threat wrapped in faux concern. She was laying the groundwork. The human consort is unstable." "My mind has never been clearer, Lady Serafina," I said, meeting her gaze. "I find the old words have a remarkable clarity. They reveal foundations, and they reveal the cracks in those who pretend to build upon them." Her green eyes flashed. The mask slipped for a moment, revealing a blaze of pure, venomous ambition. You play a dangerous game, little heir. You sit on a throne you did not earn, wielding a power you do not understand, getting in the way of a future that is inevitable. Is the future inevitable, or is it just the one you and your father have designed? The ward stands, the compact holds. That is the only future this mountain needs. The ward is a relic, a cage for a power that could elevate us to gods. Kalen is a sentimental fool, clinging to the past like a child to a blanket. And you are his new pet, a key he found to keep the lock rusted shut. But keys can be stolen or broken. The admission was shocking in its bluntness. She no longer bothered to hide her goal. You would unleash that thing, knowing what it would do? Control is not unleashing, she said, regaining her icy calm. We would be its masters, and with that power, no kingdom on earth could stand against us, not even the lowland empires. We would be the new dawn, not the guardians of the endless night. You're mad. We are visionaries, and you are a roadblock. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. That song you heard? That was just a taste, a little test. The cracks are everywhere, Leora, in the mountain, in the court, even in that pretty, trusting heart of yours. We will find our way in, and when we do, you will wish you had taken the mercy of a quiet madness. She turned and swept away, leaving the scent of night flowers and malice behind. I sank back into my chair, my hands trembling. The confrontation had been coming, but the naked hatred was chilling. She wasn't just a rival, she was an apostle of the very darkness we were trying to contain. I went straight to Kalen's study. He was reviewing scout reports, his brow furrowed. I told him everything, the hollow song, Seraphina's threats, her confession. His face grew darker with every word. When I finished, he was silent for a long minute. She has overplayed her hand, he said finally. To speak so openly means they are closer to action than I feared. They must believe they have found a way to access the ward's power without the key, or they believe they are about to acquire the key. You, you. He stood, pacing. The solstice is their deadline too. If you perform the rekindling and become the anchor, the ward stabilizes for another age. Their dream of harnessing it dies. They must either stop the ritual, corrupt it, or control you before then. What do we do? We accelerate your training, and we set a watch, not just on Seraphina and Valerius, but on the known cracks, the old tunnels. Professor Allister will help you with the ritual's practicalities. I will handle the political and physical defenses. I must also be prepared, Leora, for the possibility that not all your enemies will be so easily identified. The hollow song can mimic anyone, a friend, a servant, even me. The thought was a new kind of terror. Who could I trust? I trust the ring, I said, holding up my hand. Its warmth is constant, true. I will use that as my touchstone. A genuine, weary smile touched his lips. Wisdom from a starlight air. Then let us begin. The true test is coming, and we must be the unshakable foundation when it does. That night, I asked Mistress Valora about the song. She grew very still. You heard it clearly, and you refused it? I did. Good. That is the first and greatest defense, but it will not be the last. The song grows stronger as the ward weakens. It will try different melodies. Loneliness, pride, love. It will offer you what you think you most want. What if it offers me a way to save everyone without the sacrifice? I asked, voicing my deepest, most secret hope. Mistress Valora's eyes filled with profound sorrow. That, my child, will be its most dangerous tune of all, for that is the one lie you will most desperately wish to believe. The echo of my mother's lullaby haunted me. It wasn't a memory, it was a theft, a defilement of one of the few pure things from my past. The hollow song had found a crack in my armor, a fissure of grief I thought I'd buried. I woke not with tears, but with cold, hard anger. They would not have her. They would not have any part of me. My training intensified. Professor Allister moved from theory to practical sigil work, teaching me to draw the old tongue symbols for purity, discernment, and warding with a special silver chalk that hummed under my fingertips. Kaelin drilled me in meditation, pushing me to build mental rooms, a library of knowledge, a garden of peace, a forge of will, where I could retreat when the song pressed in. One afternoon, instead of the painting tower, he led me to the citadel's outer walls. The wind here was a physical force, screaming off the peaks and pulling at our clothes. "The song is a subtle poison," he shouted over the gale. "But our enemies are not only subtle. You must be able to defend yourself in all ways." He began to teach me to fight, not with swords. My human strength was no match for a vampire's, but with leverage, with misdirection, with the small, sharp dagger he gave me, its hilt cool and etched with tiny star-like patterns. Aim for the joints, the eyes, create an opening and run. Your mind is your greatest weapon, but this, he said, tapping the dagger, is your last argument. As we trained, a watchful presence seemed to settle over the citadel. Kaelin's personal guard, vampires of few words and grim countenances, became more visible. I noticed Corin, the cheerful stable hand, was often in the corridors near my rooms or the library, always with a ready grin and a dust rag, his eyes curiously sharp. Mistress Valora took to bringing my meals herself, her serene demeanor a constant, calming anchor. The political cracks widened. At the next council gathering, Lord Valerius presented a scientific report from scholars in his employ, arguing that the geothermal energy fluctuations presented a unique opportunity for ambient power harvesting. He proposed a small monitored excavation in a lower tunnel to place energy siphon crystals. "To do nothing is to waste a divine gift," he intoned, his voice resonating in the chamber. "We can strengthen the citadel, enrich the valleys, and ensure our sovereignty, all from the mountain's own restless heart." Magistrate Alden was vehemently opposed. "My people's stories say to dig deep is to invite the shadow up. You would trade safety for a few brighter lights?" The debate grew heated. Kaelin listened, his expression granite. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the noise. "The lower tunnels are sealed by my ancestors' decree. That decree stands. There will be no excavations. The mountain's heart is not for us to tap. It is for us to guard. This is not a matter for debate, but of law." It was a direct, absolute rebuke. Lord Valerius's face went dangerously still. Seraphina, seated behind him, did not react at all, which was more frightening than any glare. After the council, Kaelin summons me to the map room. "They will not obey the decree," he said, without preamble. "They will attempt an unauthorized excavation, soon. They are too bold now to wait." "How do you know?" "Because they have already begun." He pointed to a section of the three-dimensional model, a network of fine lines representing the natural underways on the eastern slope, far from the citadel's main doors. Scouts reported fresh tool marks here, in a supposedly collapsed tunnel. They're trying to find a back way in, circumventing the sealed doors. A chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature seized me. What's down that tunnel? It eventually connects to the fissure network, the same one we saw in the ward chamber. He looked at me, his gray eyes stormy. "They are not just seeking power, Leora. They are digging straight toward the source of the shadow's influence. Either they are fools or they believe they can treat with it." The idea was so catastrophically arrogant, it stole my breath. "We have to stop them." "We will. But if we move openly, it becomes a civil war within the citadel. Many are swayed by Valerius's promises of prosperity. We must catch them in the act, with proof undeniable. He placed a hand on the model over the citadel's heart. And you will be the bait. And my stomach lurched. He raised a hand before I could protest. Not directly. Your studies. You will request a field examination of the flora near the eastern slopes for your historical botany research. Professor Allister will accompany you with a few guards. It will be a public, scholarly outing. Valerius's people will be watching you. It will pull their eyes to the surface while I take a smaller group and descend into the underworry from a different point. We will find their dig site and seal it from behind them. It was risky. It meant splitting up, with me in a potentially vulnerable position, but I understood the logic. I was the distraction, the flash of movement that pulls the predator's gaze. When? I asked, my voice steady. 2 days. Prepare. The night before the expedition, the hollow song returned. It didn't try the lullaby again. This time, it was the sounds of Kalen's voice whispering just outside my door. Leora, let me in. The plan has changed. Serafina knows everything. You're in danger. Come with me, now. The voice was perfect. The tone of urgent concern was exactly his. My hand went to the door latch, my heart pounding. Then I felt it. My ring, usually a steady warmth, was cold, ice cold. I jerked my hand back as if burned. The ring was my touchstone. Its cold was a warning scream. I know you're not him, I said to the empty wood of the door. Show yourself. The voice outside gave a soft, sibilant laugh that was nothing like Kalen. Clever key, but locks can be picked. Then, silence. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the door, the silver chalk in my hand, drawing warding sigils on the floor until dawnlight lightened the windows. The morning of the expedition was clear and bitterly cold. I wore my practical leathers, a warm cloak, and carried a pack with botanical specimens Professor Allister had pre-selected for our ruse. He met me at the stables, accompanied by 4 of Kalen's guard, 2 vampires, 2 humans, all stern and professional. Corin was there, saddling a gentle mare for me. Beautiful day for a ride, my lady, he said, his grin infectious. Keep your eyes open. The mountain flowers this time of year are shy, but they're there. He patted the mare's neck and gave me a look that was suddenly, completely serious. Stay on the path we discussed, no matter what. I nodded, understanding the coded message. The plan was in motion. We rode out of the main gates and down the winding switchback road, then cut east across a rugged plateau. The air was thin and sharp. Professor Allister pointed out various plants, his voice carrying in the stillness. I played my part, asking questions, sketching in a notebook, but my senses were stretched taut. I watched the jagged rock formations, the dark mouths of caves. We had been out for an hour when one of the human guards stiffened. Movement on the ridge above us. We all looked. For a moment, nothing. Then a figure silhouetted against the sky, a vampire, armed. Not one of ours, then another. 3 in total. They didn't advance, they just watched. Right on schedule, Professor Allister murmured. They're making sure we stay put. The tension was a live wire. Minutes stretched. Then, from deep below our feet, through the rock itself, came a muffled, thunderous boom. The ground shuddered. The horses shied. The vampires on the ridge vanished. That was not part of the plan, one of the guards muttered, drawing his sword. A second, sharper explosion followed, closer. Dust plumed from the entrance of a cave 100 yards away, the very tunnel Kalen had marked on the map. They hadn't just been digging, they'd been using blasting powder. Fall back! To the citadel! The lead guard shouted. But from the dusty cave mouth emerged figures, not Valerius's vampires. These things moved with a skittering, jerky gait. They were roughly humanoid but seemed woven from shale, shadow, and broken crystal. Their eyes were points of cold blue light. Where they walked, the grass beneath their feet blackened. The guard's voice was hushed with dread. "Stone-sick, the shadow's dreams, they've taken form." The creatures turned their light-pin eyes toward us, and they began to run. The stone-sick moved with a terrifying, unnatural speed, their jagged limbs scraping against rock. The lead vampire guard met the first one with a shout, his sword flashing. The blade sparked against stone-shard skin, barely slowing the creature. It slammed into him, and they went down in a tangle of violence. "Ride!" Professor Alistair yelled, his aged voice cracking with command. I wheeled my mare, digging my heels into her sides. She leapt forward, panic giving her wings. The other guards formed a rear guard, fighting a desperate, retreating action. I heard a scream cut short, one of the humans. The plateau was a blur of gray rock and terror. The citadel gates seemed a mile away. A stone-sick creature lunged from behind a boulder, its clawed hand swiping from my leg. I jerked the reins, and the mare swerved, the claw missing by inches. I fumbled for the dagger Kaelin had given me, my hand slick with sweat. An arrow whistled past my ear and thudded into the creature's light eye. It shrieked, a sound like grinding boulders, and stumbled. I glanced back to see Corin, not with a dust rag, but with a hunter's bow, already knocking another arrow from the back of a lathered pony. His cheerful grin was gone, replaced with a lethal focus. "Keep going, my lady. Don't look back." We galloped for the gates, which were now opening, more guards pouring out. The surviving members of our party staggered in behind us. Of the 4 original guards, only 1 vampire and Corin made it. Professor Alistair was pale and breathing hard, but unharmed. Inside the walls, chaos reigned. The explosions had been felt throughout the citadel. Kaelin was back. Mistress Valora found me in the courtyard as I dismounted, my legs trembling. "The lower levels," she said, her face ash-gray. "There was a collapse. The Lord Guardian and his team are trapped. And the things, the stone-sick, they're in the upper underways. They're climbing." My heart stopped. Kaelin, trapped, possibly dead, the world tilted. Then the cold clarity of survival seized me. He wasn't dead. I wouldn't believe it. The ward's pulse was still there, a weak, irregular thrum in my bones. If Kaelin were gone, it would be worse. "Seal the interior gates," I heard my own voice ring out, sharp and clear. The guards turned to look at me, confused. "Section by section, fall back to the Great Hall and the residential wings. Barricade every doorway to the lower galleries." My orders cut through the panic. They were logical, defensible. The guards began to move. "My lady, the stone-sick, they seem drawn to life, to warmth. Then we draw them to where we want them. The grand atrium. It's open, has multiple levels. We can defend the upper balconies." I turned to Corin, who was reloading his quiver from the armory stores. "Can you use that bow from a height?" "Yes, my lady." "Then get to the highest balcony, pick your shots, aim for the lights in their heads." I was not a warrior. I was a girl who read too many books, but books taught strategy. They taught about bottlenecks and high ground. We organized a fighting retreat. Servants, human and vampire alike, carried furniture to barricade doors. The few remaining guards funneled the skittering, screeching stone-sick that breached the lower doors toward the vast, plant-filled atrium. It was a nightmare scene. The beautiful, serene garden was trampled as the stone creatures clambered over ferns and through streams. But from the stone balconies that ringed the room 3 stories up, arrows and crossbow bolts rained down. Corin was a demon with his bow, each shot finding a light eye. A pierced eye meant the creature froze, crumbled into inert rock and drifting shadow. But there were too many. They began to climb the walls, their sharp fingers finding purchase in the mortar. "They're coming up!" someone screamed. I stood on the second-level balcony, the dagger in my hand useless. I felt a surge of helpless rage. This was my home. These were my people, and Kaelin was somewhere in the dark below. My ring, which had been cold since the false voice at my door, suddenly flared with searing heat. The pain was intense, blinding. It wasn't a warning. It was a demand. I looked at the stone creatures, at the shadow stuff that writhed within their fractured bodies. Celestial magic opposed shadow. The ward was made of it. My blood was tuned to it. I didn't think. I acted. I ran to the balcony's edge, overlooking the main floor where the fight was thickest. I raised my left hand, the one with the burning ring. I didn't know any spells. I only knew what I was, a starlight heir, and I refused this darkness in my home. "No!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the glass-domed space. I focused everything, my fear for Kaelin, my anger at the Valerius faction, my love for the sun-drenched valley, my will to survive, and I pushed it through the ring, toward the ward below, toward the concept of light itself. The ring exploded with silent, silver light. It wasn't a beam, it was a wave, a pulse of pure, cool, stellar energy that radiated from my hand. It washed through the atrium, harmless to the living, but cataclysmic to the stone-sick. Where the light touched them, they screamed. The shadow stuff binding their stone bodies vaporized. They came apart like dry clay in a river, collapsing into piles of harmless gravel. The few clinging to the walls lost their grip and fell, shattering on the stone below. The light faded. The sudden silence was deafening. I swayed, drained to my core. My vision swam. Strong hands caught me, Mistress Valora. All around, people stared, their faces etched with shock and awe. The floor of the atrium was littered with gray rubble. "The air," someone whispered. "The stories are true." Before anyone could react, a new sound came, the grinding of stone on stone from a servant's entrance at the far end of the atrium. We all turned, weapons raised, exhausted bodies tensing anew. The door was shoved open from the other side. Kaelin stumbled through, covered in rock dust and dark, viscous fluid that wasn't his blood. 5 of his original 10 warriors followed him, battered but alive. His eyes swept the scene, the barricades, the rubble, the gathered, stunned people, and finally, me, supported by Mistress Valora. He crossed the distance in a blink, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Are you hurt? What happened here?" "The stone-sick," I managed, my voice weak. "They attacked from the east tunnel. We led them here. I stopped them." He looked at the piles of gravel, then back at my face, at the ring still glowing faintly on my hand. His expression was unreadable. Relief, pride, and a deep, fathomless fear. "You unleashed your power, voluntarily. They were in my home." A ghost of smile touched his lips. Then it vanished. "Valerius is dead." The words landed like another stone. "What?" "In the tunnels. He was there, directing the excavation. They broke into an old chamber. It was flooded with concentrated shadow. It consumed him, turned him into something worse than the stone-sick before our eyes. We had to bring down the ceiling to seal it." He wearied to his very soul. Seraphina was not with him. The news was a victory and a disaster. The main instigator was gone, but his fanatical daughter, who knew all his plans, was still at large, and a new terrible breach had been opened and only hastily sealed. "The ward?" I asked. "Weakened further. The shock of the breach. It's failing faster. We have weeks, not months." Weeks. The solstice was still over a month away. "Then we don't wait for the solstice," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "We perform the rekindling as soon as I am ready. We can't afford to wait for the perfect celestial alignment. We make our own." Kaelin stared at me, the fear in his eyes warring with desperate hope. "The ritual is dangerous enough at the optimal time. Off schedule, it could kill you. Or worse, it could backfire and shatter the ward completely. Staying on schedule could mean the ward fails before we even try. I've read the texts. The solstice thins the veil, making it easier. It doesn't make it impossible at other times. It just makes it harder, more dangerous for me." I took a deep breath, standing on my own strength. "I am the heir. This is my choice. I choose sooner." He searched my face for a long moment, then bowed his head, a gesture of profound respect. "Then we prepare. We perform the rekindling in 7 days." 7 days? To learn a ritual that should take a lifetime to master.
to prepare my soul to become a permanent part of an ancient prison, to root out Seraphina, who was now a fanatic without a leash, hiding somewhere in the cracks of her own making. As the citadel began the grim work of clearing the rubble and tending the wounded, I looked at my ring. It had saved us today. Soon I would have to give all of myself to the source of its power. And somewhere in the wounded mountain, Seraphina was listening, and she would be making her own plans.
The 7 days were a descent into a different kind of darkness, one of exhausting preparation and gnawing dread. The citadel moved in a state of hushed, focused siege. Repairs were made to the breached areas, but the real work happened in the library and the sealed meditation chambers. Professor Alistair and I pored over the crystal tablet and every related scroll. The ritual was a symphony of precise steps, purification fasts, specific meditations to align my essence, the chanting of the old tongue verses that would act as a guide wire for my power. I had to memorize it all until the words were etched into my bones. Kalen, meanwhile, worked on the other half of the bridge. He explained it to me in one of our few quiet moments. The guardian does not channel power. He acts as the conduit, the stabilizer. My bloodline is attuned to the ward's core structure. I will guide your essence to the precise breaks in the weave. My will must be absolute, or your power could spill or be stolen. He looked haunted. If the hollow song infiltrates my mind during the ritual, it could use me to divert you, to feed you to the devourer instead of the ward. The trust had to be absolute, both ways. It was a terrifying gamble. On the 5th day, we received a report. Seraphina had been seen, not in the citadel, but in the Sunward Valley. She had approached Magistrate Alden under a flag of parley, weeping, claiming her father had gone mad, that she was a fugitive from his doomed schemes, that she sought sanctuary and wished to warn the citadel of remaining dangers. She's lying, I said immediately when Kaylin told me. We were in the map room, the model of the mountain between us like a chessboard. Undoubtedly, he agreed. But to what end? Alden is no fool. He sent her away and doubled the valley patrols. But her appearance there, it's a message. She wants us to know she's free, she's close, and she's not hiding. She's distracting us, making us look outward to the valley, while she prepares something inside. I studied the model, my eyes tracing the tunnels. She needs to stop the ritual. To do that, she needs to get to me or to you before we reach the ward chamber, or she needs to corrupt the ritual itself. A soft knock interrupted us. Mistress Valora answered, her face tight with distress. My lord, my lady, it's Corin. He's taken a fever, a bad one. He's raving. The healers can't explain it. He keeps asking for Lady Leora. Corin, the cheerful guard who had saved my life, a human vulnerable to human sickness. But the timing felt wrong. Poison? A ploy? Kaelin and I exchanged a look. I'll go, I said. If it's a trick, it's aimed at me. Let's spring it on our terms. I slid Kaelin's dagger into my boot. The infirmary was a quiet, herb-scented ward. Corin lay on a cot, drenched in sweat, his face pale. His eyes were closed, his breath ragged. A healer hovered nearby. His body is hot, but his spirit is chilled. It's as if something is sucking the warmth from his soul. I approached the cot. Corin? It's Leora. His eyes flew open. They were glassy, unfocused. My lady, the song, it's so cold. He reached a trembling hand toward me. I took his hand. It was like ice. What song, Corin? The pretty song, from the cracks. It promised no more fear. His voice dropped to a whisper. She said you'd understand, that you'd want to hear it too. My blood ran cold. Who said, Corin?
His eyes suddenly focused, with a sharp, intelligent clarity that was not his own. A faint, cruel smile touched his lips. His grip on my hand tightened, vice-like. I said, came a voice from Corin's mouth, but it was Seraphina's voice, smooth and venomous. Hello, Key. I tried to pull back, but his hand was iron. The healer gasped. A little psychic parasite, the Seraphina voice purred from Corin's throat, planted when my stone-sick friends grazed him. He's been my eyes and ears for days. He heard all your pretty plans about an early ritual. Thank you for that. Let him go, Seraphina, I snarled. Oh, I will. His mind is almost burned out anyway. But first, a message. You cannot win. The Devourer's whisper is in the stones, in the air, in the hearts of the fearful. Your brave little display in the atrium? A flicker. The coming shadow is a tide. Corn's body convulsed. I have a new key, one that doesn't require tedious rituals. I found it in my father's notes, a back door. And at the moment you try to be the anchor, I will turn it, and all that lovely starlight you plan to pour into the prison, I will divert it. I will use it to blow the doors wide open. Her laughter, using Corin's voice, was a horrific sound. Come and stop me, heiress, if you dare. Corin's body went limp, his hand falling from mine. The life faded from his eyes, leaving them empty. The parasite had consumed its host. I stood, shaking with rage and grief. The healer rushed forward, but I knew it was too late. Kalen answered, having sensed the wrongness. He took in the scene, my face, Corin's body, and his own went cold with fury. She's found another way, I said, my voice hollow. A back door. She plans to sabotage the ritual, to use my own power to break the ward. Kalen's fists clenched. Then we change the ritual. How? We don't give her a target. We move the time. Now, tonight. It was madness. I wasn't fully prepared, but Seraphina thought she had days. Surprise was our only weapon. The purification fast, foregone. The alignment meditations, we'll do them on the way down. Are you ready, Leora, to bind your soul to this mountain, to me, to an eternity of vigilance? There may be no going back. I looked at Corin's still, young face. He had died for this citadel, for the valley. I thought of the ward's terrible, beautiful light, of the shadow waiting to be unleashed. I met Kalen's stormy eyes. I was ready the moment I signed that marriage contract. Let's finish this. We moved like ghosts through the citadel, alerting only Mistress Valora, Professor Alistair, and a handful of Kalen's most trusted guards. The story would be that we were conducting a final deep meditation in the sacred chambers, a plausible lie. As we descended once more into the cold, blue-lit depths, I tried to calm my racing heart, to run through the chants. Kalen walked beside me, a solid, silent presence. The bond between us felt taut, a bowstring about to be released. We reached the last door. The great, dark metal was silent, imposing. This was it. No turning back. I placed my palm on the depression. My ring flared. The silver star ignited. The door sighed othed. The ward chamber awaited, the great sphere pulsing its slow, weary rhythm. The frayed sections seemed larger, the tendrils of shadow seeping out more numerous. The core of blackness seemed to swirl with a lazy, hungry awareness. We walked to the very edge of the pattern inscribed on the floor, at the perimeter of the sphere's light. Remember, Kalen whispered, taking my left hand in his right, our linked hands held toward the ward. You are the light. I am the guide. Pour yourself into the breaks. I will show you the way. Do not listen to any other voice. I nodded, unable to speak. I closed my eyes, beginning the first chance of offering, the old tongue words flowing from my lips, powered by my will, my fear, my hope. I felt my essence, a warm silver stream within me, begin to stir. It flowed down my arm into our joined hands. Kalen's cool presence was there, not taking it, but channeling it, aiming it like a lens. I opened my eyes and saw the silver stream of my starlight, visible as a slender ribbon of liquid silver, leave our hands and fly toward a great frayed rift in one of the golden bands. The moment my power touched the ward, the chamber exploded with noise. Not from us, from the dark fissure in the wall. Seraphina stepped out, not from a hidden door, but seemingly from the shadow itself. She was disheveled, her eyes blazing with fanatical fervor. In her hands she held not a weapon, but a jagged black crystal that throbbed with stolen shadow. And behind her, more stone-sick creatures crawled from the crack, but these were different.
The hollow song was a riptide, pulling me under. Seraphina's promised paradise glittered just out of reach, a life of power without price, freedom without farewell. My starlight stream sputtered, thinning to a wisp. The great ward groaned, a new crack splintering up a silver band with an ear-splitting shriek. Kalen's hand in mine was an anchor chain, but I was the ship being torn apart. Leora, look at me. His voice cut through the symphony of lies, but it was distant, a shout from a far shore. I looked at him, not at the desperate king, but at the man in the rain, the man who had offered a choice with no pretty promises, the man who carried a mountain's weight on his shoulders and had asked for nothing but my honest effort in return. I saw the truth in his winter gray eyes, not a demand for my sacrifice, but a raw, terrifying hope that I would choose to stand with him. That was the key. Choice. The hollow song offered a fantasy where all choices were easy, all costs were paid by others. But true freedom, true strength, was born from hard choices, from accepting cost. Corin's face flashed in my mind, not as a necessary loss, but as a friend who had chosen to fight for his home. He hadn't died for a paradise of captured shadow. He had died to keep the darkness locked away. With the wrench that felt like tearing my own soul in two, I turned my back on Seraphina's glittering lie. I stopped fighting the riptide and instead dove deeper into my own core, into the memory of my mother's real voice, into the feel of sun on the valley, into the quiet solidarity of a shared burden. I chose the bond. I chose the duty. I chose Kalen. I slammed my will shut against the song and poured everything I was, every scrap of hope, grief, love, and stubborn defiance into the bridge. The silver stream erupted from our joined hands, no longer a trickle, but a torrent, a river of pure, defiant starlight. It screamed across the chamber and slammed into the frayed rift in the ward. The effect was instantaneous. The frayed threads of light began to knit back together, burning with the fierce, clean silver. The new crack stopped spreading. Seraphina's triumphant shriek turned into a roar of fury. "No, you blind little fool! You choose chains!" She thrust the black heart shard forward. The grafted stone sick behind her lurched into motion, charging not at us, but at the edges of the ward itself, clawing at the weakened bands. "They'll fracture it from the outside," Kalen yelled, his own will straining to keep our channel focused. "I must defend the perimeter. Hold the bridge, Leora, no matter what you see. Hold it." He released my hand.
The moment he let go, the world exploded into pain and terror. The bridge remained, a vibrating, screaming cord of my own essence, connecting me directly to the weeping ward. But without Kalen's guidance, the power was wild, flooding into breaks at random, some healing, some causing new stresses. It was agony, a feedback loop of spiritual burn. I screamed, but I didn't let go. I focused on the central, largest rift and poured my starlight into it, a laser of repair. Kalen became a blur of motion. He met the charging stone sick not with the sword, but with bare hands, moving faster than sight. He shattered the grafted crystals on their chests with precise, brutal strikes. Each crystal's destruction released a wail of shadow that he weathered, his own form seeming to flicker with a deep inner light, the guardian's own attunement to the ward. He was magnificent and terrible, a force of nature defending its heart. But there were too many. One slipped past him, its claws scoring a deep groove in a golden band. The ward shuddered violently. My starlight stream faltered, the disruption like a physical blow. Seraphina saw her opening. She darted past the combat, straight for me, the heart shard raised like a dagger. If I can't have your power, I'll spill it on the floor. She lunged. I was trapped, one hand extended, pouring my soul into the ward, unable to move, to defend myself. Kalen, surrounded by three stone sick, saw it. With a roar that shook the cavern, he moved, not toward me, but toward the ward itself. He slammed his own palm directly onto the pulsating sear, onto a nexus of silver and blue bands. Leora, now! All of it! Through me! I didn't understand, but I obeyed. I redirected the torrent of my starlight, not at the rift, but at him, at his hand on the ward. The moment my power touched him, I felt it. The bridge wasn't broken, it was reconfigured. He wasn't just the guide anymore. He had made himself a living part of the circuit. My starlight flowed into him, and he channeled it through his own being, through his ancient bond with the ward, and into the core with a precision and force I could never have mustered alone. The ward blazed with incandescent light. The surge of power repelled Seraphina like a physical wave, throwing her back. The remaining stone sick crumbled to dust. The heart shard in her hand cracked like a dying star. But the cost was written on Kalen's face. Channeling that much raw celestial energy through a vampire's body, one attuned to the shadow's prison, was torture. Smoke rose from his skin where my light touched him. He was burning from the inside out. His teeth gritted in a silent scream. His eyes locked on mine, holding the connection. He was sacrificing himself to amplify my power. No! The cry was ripped from me. This wasn't the bond I wanted, not his destruction for my success. In that moment of shared, desperate anguish, something deeper clicked. The ritual's final line. The bond becomes permanent. The anchor is set. It wasn't about me anchoring the ward. It was about us anchoring each other. The air and the guardian, starlight and stone, a shared burden, a shared life force. I didn't pull my power back. Instead, I opened myself further. I reached out with my will, not just to give, but to share, to take some of his burden, his pain, his ancient loneliness into myself, to let my mortal vitality temper his immortal strain. The moment I did, the burning smoke around Kalen ceased. The torrent of light stabilized, becoming a brilliant, balanced cascade. The ward's wounds closed with swift, sure strokes. The core of blackness receded, pressed back by the renewed weave. The rekindling was working. Seraphina scrambled to her feet, the cracked heart shard falling from her nerveless fingers. She stared at the healing ward, at Kalen and me joined in a pillar of shared light, and her fanatical certainty shattered into desolate understanding. She had lost, not just the battle, but her entire world. With the final, broken sob, she turned and fled into the dark fissure, swallowed by the shadows she had coveted. We didn't pursue. We held the connection until the last frayed thread was whole, until the ward pulsed with a strong, healthy, rhythmic thump, thump, thump that echoed not with menace, but with solidity. Finally, as one, we released it. The light faded. The chamber was quiet, lit only by the ward's own steady, glorious glow. It was whole. It was safe. Kalen slumped to his knees. I fell beside him, utterly spent, every nerve screaming. We were both alive. We were both changed. I looked at him. His eyes were still winter gray, but in their depths I now saw a glimmer of reflected starlight. And when I looked at my own hands, I saw a new subtle strength in them, a resilience that felt ancient. The bond was permanent. I could feel it, a quiet, humming connection between his soul and mine, and between both of us and the mountain's heart. I was not just Leora. I was the anchor. He was not just Kalen. He was the guardian. And we were bound, not by chains, but by a choice made in the dark, facing the abyss together. He reached out a trembling hand and touched my cheek. His touch was no longer just cool. It was a perfect balance, warm with my shared life, cool with his enduring strength. "Welcome home, Leora," he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion and wonder. And for the first time since I'd arrived in this impossible fortress on a cloud, I truly was. We emerged from the deep waves as the first true light of dawn was painting the highest peaks in rose and gold. We were supported by Mistress Valora and Professor Alastair, who had felt the surge of power and come to find us. Their faces, etched with worry, transformed into stunned reverence when they saw the ward's renewed pulse reflected in our eyes, in the new, unbreakable silence between us. The news spread through the citadel like a cleansing wind. The ward was secure. The stone-sick were inert dust. The Valerius plot was shattered, its master dead, and its heir vanished into the shadows from whence she came. A silent, profound relief settled over the high halls, followed by a wave of exhausted celebration. But for Kalen and me, the victory was a quiet, personal earthquake. The permanent bond was not a heavy chain, but a living connection. I could feel a whisper of his focused calm when I grew anxious. He later told me he felt a spark of my stubborn resolve when fatigue threatened him. We were separate, but interwoven, a true partnership forged in the heart of desperation. In the days that followed, there were councils, of course. Lord Bryn and Magistrate Alden took lead in rooting out the last remnants of Valerius's faction, a process done with firm justice, not vengeance. The story that settled was one of tragic ambition, Lord Valerius delving too deep into forbidden arts, consumed by the very power he sought to control. Seraphina was officially listed as missing, presumed claimed by the Shadow. The truth of her fates was a dark secret Kalen and I would carry. The mountain had its cracks, and some things were best left sealed within them. A week after the rekindling, we stood again on the balcony overlooking the sunward valley. The harvest was beginning, tiny figures moving in the golden fields. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and ripe grain. "It's safe," I said, not a question. "It is safe," Kalen confirmed. "The ward is strong, stronger than it has been in centuries. The bond, it did more than repair. It renewed." I looked down at the silver ring, now a permanent part of my hand, its stone glowing with a gentle inner light that matched the pulse I could always feel in the back of my mind. What does it mean? For us? For forever? He turned to me, the dawn light softening the harsh lines of his face. "It means what we choose it to mean, Leora. The bond ensures the ward's stability. It ties my life force to yours. You will age differently now, slowly. As long as the ward stands and I live, you will live. We are partners in the truest sense. But the shape of that partnership, he took my hand, his thumb brushing over the ring, that is still ours to write day by day. There is no debt between us, only a choice renewed each morning. It was not a declaration of passionate love. It was something more solid, more real. It was a promise of shared mornings, of councils faced together, of a life built side by side. After a lifetime of being alone, it was everything. I want to learn to paint the valley at dawn. A genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and transformed him, broke across his face. Then I will teach you. There was much to do. I had a mountain's worth of history to translate, a court to help lead, a people, human and vampire, to understand and serve. Kalen had a kingdom to guide, its wounds from the recent conflict to heal. But as we stood there, the first true rays of sunlight finally crested the peak and poured into the valley, bathing everything in liquid gold. It lit up the village windows, set the rivers on fire, and touched the faces of the children already running into the lanes. I married a poor man to escape a cage. I woken in a vampire king's castle. I walked into an ancient war and found my true name. I was Leora Thorne, starlight heir, anchor of the ward, and partner to the guardian of the northern reach. I was not a pawn. I was not a symbol. I was home. And as the sun warmed my face and Kalen's hand rested firmly in mine, I knew with a certainty that resonated in my newly anchored soul. Our story was not an ending. It was a glorious, uncharted, and fiercely guarded beginning.